Hello dear viewer, and thank you for joining me on day 48 of reading the Bible together. Today we are reading Leviticus chapter 7 and 8 from the Old Testament, as well as Matthew chapter 26 verse 47 to 68 from the New Testament. Let's start. Leviticus chapter 7. Repayment offerings. The following are the regulations for repayment offerings, which are very holy. The animal for this offering is to be killed on the north side of the altar, where the animals for the burnt offerings are killed, and its blood is to be thrown against all four sides of the altar. All of its fat shall be removed and offered on the altar: the fat tail, the fat covering the internal organs, the kidneys and the fat on them, and the best part of the liver. The priest shall burn all the fat on the altar as a food offering to the Lord. It is a repayment offering. Any male of the priestly families may eat it, but it must be eaten in a holy place, because it is very holy. There is one regulation that applies to both the sin offering and the repayment offering. The meat belongs to the priest who offers the sacrifice. The skin of an animal offered as a burnt offering belongs to the priest who offers the sacrifice. Every grain offering that has been baked in an oven or prepared in a pan or on a griddle belongs to the priest who has offered it to God. But all uncooked grain offerings, whether mixed with oil or dry, belong to all the Aaronite priests and must be shared equally among them. Fellowship offerings. The following are the regulations for the fellowship offerings presented to the Lord. If you make this offering as a thanksgiving offering to God, you shall present, together with the animal to be sacrificed, an offering of bread made without yeast, either thick loaves made of flour mixed with olive oil, or thin cakes brushed with olive oil, or cakes made of flour mixed with olive oil. In addition, you shall offer loaves of bread baked with yeast. You shall present one part of each kind of bread as a special contribution to the Lord. It belongs to the priest who takes the blood of the animal and throws it against the altar. The flesh of the animal must be eaten on the day it is sacrificed. None of it may be left until the next morning. If you bring a fellowship offering as fulfillment of a vow or as your own free will offering, not all of it has to be eaten on the day it is offered, but any that is left over may be eaten on the following day. Any meat that still remains on the third day must be burnt. If any of it is eaten on the third day, God will not accept your offering. The offering will not be counted to your credit and will be considered unclean, and whoever eats it will suffer the consequences. If the meat comes into contact with anything ritually unclean, it must not be eaten but must be burnt. Any of you that are ritually clean may eat the meat, but if any of you who are not clean eat it, you shall no longer be considered one of God's people. Also, if you eat the meat of this offering after you have touched anything ritually unclean, whether from a person or an animal, you shall no longer be considered one of God's people. The Lord gave Moses the following regulations for the people of Israel. No fat of cattle, sheep, or goats shall be eaten. The fat of an animal that has died a natural death or has been killed by a wild animal must not be eaten, but it may be used for any other purpose. Anyone who eats the fat of an animal that may be offered as a food offering to the Lord will no longer be considered one of God's people. No matter where the Israelites live, they must never use the blood of birds or animals for food. Anyone who breaks this law will no longer be considered one of God's people. The Lord gave Moses the following regulations for the people of Israel. When any of you offer a fellowship offering, you must bring part of it as a special gift to the Lord, bringing it with your own hands as a food offering. You shall bring the fat of the animal with its breast and present it as a special gift to the Lord. The priest shall burn the fat on the altar, but the breast shall belong to the priests. The right hand leg of the animal shall be given as a special contribution to the priest who offers the blood and the fat of the fellowship offering. The breast of the animal is a special gift, and the right hind leg is a special contribution that the Lord has taken from the people of Israel, and given to the priests. This is what the people of Israel must give to the priests for all time to come. This is the part of the food offered to the Lord that was given to Aaron and his sons on the day they were ordained as priests. On that day the Lord commanded the people of Israel to give them this part of the offering. It is a regulation that the people of Israel must obey for all time to come. These then are the regulations for the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, the sin offerings, the repayment offerings, the ordination offerings, and the fellowship offerings. There on Mount Sinai in the desert, the Lord gave these commands to Moses on the day he told the people of Israel to make their offerings. Leviticus chapter 8. The ordination of Aaron and his sons. The Lord said to Moses, "Take Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the tent of my presence, and bring the priestly garments, the anointing oil, the young bull for the sin offering, the 2 rams, and the basket of unleavened bread. Then call the whole community together there." Moses did as the Lord had commanded, and when the community had assembled, he said to them, "What I am now about to do is what the Lord has commanded." Moses brought Aaron and his sons forward and had them take a ritual bath. He put the shirt and the robe on Aaron and the sash around his waist. He put the ephod on him and fastened it by putting its finely woven belt around his waist. He put the breastpiece on him and put the Urim and Thummim in it. He placed the turban on his head, and on the front of it he put the gold ornament, the sacred sign of dedication, just as the Lord had commanded him. Then Moses took the anointing oil and put it on the tent of the Lord's presence and everything that was in it, and in this way he dedicated it all to the Lord. He took some of the oil and sprinkled it 7 times on the altar and its equipment, and on the basin and its base, in order to dedicate them to the Lord. He ordained Aaron by pouring some of the anointing oil on his head. Next, Moses brought the sons of Aaron forward and put shirts on them, put sashes around their waists, and tied caps on their heads, just as the Lord had commanded. Then Moses brought the young bull for the sin offering, and Aaron and his sons put their hands on its head. Moses killed it and took some of the blood, and with his finger put it on the projections at the corners of the altar, in order to dedicate it. He then poured out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. In this way, he dedicated it and purified it. Moses took all the fat on the internal organs, the best part of the liver, and the kidneys with the fat on them, and burnt it all on the altar. He took the rest of the bull, including its skin, flesh, and intestines, and burnt it outside the camp, just as the Lord had commanded. Next, Moses brought the ram for the burnt offering, and Aaron and his sons put their hands on its head. Moses killed it and threw the blood on all 4 sides of the altar. He cut the ram in pieces, washed the internal organs and the hind legs with water, and burnt the head, the fat, and all the rest of the ram on the altar, just as the Lord had commanded. This burnt offering was a food offering, and its odor was pleasing to the Lord. Then Moses brought the second ram, which was for the ordination of priests, and Aaron and his sons put their hands on its head. Moses killed it and took some of the blood and put it on the lobe of Aaron's right ear, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Then he brought Aaron's sons forward and put some of the blood on the lobes of their right ears, on the thumbs of their right hands, and on the big toes of their right feet. Moses then threw the rest of the blood on all 4 sides of the altar. He took the fat tail, all the fat covering the internal organs, the best part of the liver, the kidneys with the fat on them, and the right hind leg. Then he took 1 loaf of bread from the basket of unleavened bread dedicated to the Lord, 1 loaf made with oil, and 1 thin cake, and he put them on top of the fat and the right hind leg. He put all of this food in the hands of Aaron and his sons, and they presented it as a special gift to the Lord. Then Moses took the food from them and burnt it on the altar, on top of the burnt offering, as an ordination offering. This was a food offering, and its odor was pleasing to the Lord. Then Moses took the breast and presented it as a special gift to the Lord. It was Moses' part of the ordination ram. Moses did everything just as the Lord had commanded. Moses took some of the anointing oil and some of the blood that was on the altar and sprinkled them on Aaron and his sons and on their clothes. In this way he consecrated them and their clothes to the Lord. Moses said to Aaron and his sons, "Take the meat to the entrance of the tent of the Lord's presence, boil it, and eat it there with the bread that is in the basket of ordination offerings, just as the Lord commanded. Burn up any meat or bread that is left over. You shall not leave the entrance of the tent for 7 days, until your ordination rites are completed. The Lord commanded us to do what we have done today, in order to take away your sin. You must stay at the entrance of the tent day and night for 7 days, doing what the Lord has commanded. If you don't, you will die. This is what the Lord has commanded me." So Aaron and his sons did everything that the Lord had commanded through Moses. Please feel free to pause the video here for time to reflect on what we have read. Let's continue. Matthew chapter 26, verse 47 to 68. The arrest of Jesus. Jesus was still speaking when Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived. With him was a large crowd, armed with swords and clubs, and sent by the chief priests and the elders. The traitor had given the crowd a signal. "The man I kiss is the one you want. Arrest him." Judas went straight to Jesus and said, "Peace be with you, teacher," and kissed him. Jesus answered, "Be quick about it, friend." Then they came up, arrested Jesus, and held him tight. One of those who were with Jesus drew his sword and struck at the high priest's slave, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him. "All who take the sword will die by the sword. Don't you know that I could call on my Father for help, and at once he would send me more than 12 armies of angels? But in that case, how could the scriptures come true, which say that this is what must happen?" Then Jesus spoke to the crowd. "Did you have to come with swords and clubs to capture me, as though I were an outlaw? Every day I sat down and taught in the temple, and you did not arrest me. But all this has happened in order to make come true what the prophets wrote in the scriptures." Then all the disciples left him and ran away. Jesus before the council. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to the house of Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had gathered together. Peter followed from a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest's house. He went into the courtyard and sat down with the guards to see how it would all come out. The chief priests and the whole council tried to find some false evidence against Jesus to put him to death, but they could not find any, even though many people came forward and told lies about him. Finally, 2 men stepped up and said, "This man said, 'I am able to tear down God's temple and 3 days later build it back up.'" The high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Have you no answer to give to this accusation against you?" But Jesus kept quiet. Again the high priest spoke to him. "In the name of the living God, I now put you under oath. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus answered him, "So you say, but I tell all of you, from this time on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right side of the Almighty and coming on the clouds of heaven." At this the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Blasphemy! We don't need any more witnesses. You have just heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered, "He is guilty and must die." Then they spat in his face and beat him, and those who slapped him said, "Prophesy for us, Messiah. Guess who hit you?" Please feel free to pause the video here for time to reflect on what we have read. That's it for today, and I hope that you'll join me in the next video. Wishing you a graceful morning, day, or evening.